This summer, a typhoon caused flooding in mainland China, far away from its landfall site. The outside world noticed the torrential rains because Beijing, the capital, was severely affected. The government has admitted that, in Beijing, 11 people have been killed and another 27 are missing. Figures from the government are not reliable, and the real situation may be much more serious. Videos and pictures on the internet are horrifying. The streets are flooded. Many cars are even washed away by the flood. The headlights of some cars are still on, and as may be expected, the people in the cars are in great danger. The streets and watercourses are in a mess after the torrential rain and flooding, with wastes, debris, and wrecked cars everywhere. It is hard to imagine how many people have suffered from such a flood. Unexpectedly, a more serious disaster occurred to Zhuozhou, a small city near Beijing. Even more horrifying, the flood that hit Zhuozhou was so appalling that even those who grew up in the nearby lake area were alarmed. It was reported that, in many places, the water was 4 or 5 meters deep, even 9 meters deep. If it was only a local rain, it was impossible to form such a severe flood all of a sudden. Apparently the flood came from upstream, that is, from Beijing. In order to ensure the safety of Beijing, all the reservoirs upstream of Beijing released water, which eventually hit Zhuozhou. Downstream of Zhuozhou is Bayangdian Lake. The lake area, only 5 or 6 meters above sea level, had always been a flood discharge and storage area locally. Before, the floodwater in Zhuozhou would flow to the even lower-lying Bayangdian Lake area. But now the environment has fundamentally changed after the Xiong'an New District has been set up in Bayangdian area. The Minister of Water Resources of the CPC said that they would ensure the absolute safety of Beijing and the Xiong'an New District. Indeed, they are only concerned about the safety of their regime, not the safety of the people. Ensuring the safety of Beijing is not because tens of millions of people live there, but because it is the center of their rule. Ensuring the safety of the Xiong'an New District is not because there are any important facilities there, but because it is an image project of Xi Jinping. Since both Beijing upstream and the Xiong'an New District downstream need special protection, Zhuozhou is bound to be the victim. The small city must accept the floodwater leaked down from Beijing, yet the water could not be leaked down further to Bayangdian Lake. The water could only be dispersed on the very spot. As a result, not only a large number of villages, but also a large part of Zhuozhou city was flooded. Since many Zhuozhou residents were not notified about the flood in advance, and especially no one informed them that their home would become the flood relief area, many people were trapped by the rapidly rising floodwaters, which in many places were 5 to 6 meters deep. It was especially dangerous in villages where the prime-aged people worked in the city, while most of those left behind were elderly people and children. With modern weather forecasting, it should be possible to make forecasts and notify the people before the arrival of the floods, to prepare and arrange for the evacuation of people in flood relief zones. With modern transportation, it was possible to complete the evacuation in a matter of hours. If the evacuation had started only one day in advance, people would not have been trapped in the water. Obviously, the government did not plan, much less make serious arrangements for the evacuation. Many villagers had not got any notice at all, and it was not until the flood came that they tried to escape. But it was already too late. Many people did not even know where to flee. Due to lack of preparation and haste, many people who survived in the affected areas did not even have food, and some went without food for several days. As may be expected, there will be a lot of deaths and injuries in Zhuozhou. The first and most important cause of this flooding was Xi Jinping's decision to set up the Xiong'an New District in Bayangdian Lake area. It was extremely stupid and crazy, yet no one could stop it. Over the years, many reservoirs have been constructed upstream, coupled with the prolonged drought in North China, where most of the time There are rivers but without water. Even when there is water in the rivers, it is not plenty enough to reach Bayangdian Lake. The water surface of the lake has been shrinking. Perhaps that's why Xi Jinping decided to set up the Xiong'an New District in Bayangdian. However, this area is a depression after all. In case of a heavy rainstorm, reservoirs upstream would release water downstream, and the Xiong'an New District would be drowned. A similar case happened in 2020 to another city, Zhengzhou, where the surrounding reservoirs suddenly released water, and led to a serious disaster. Therefore, there had been worries about what would happen if Xiong'an encountered similar heavy rainstorms. An elderly local man used to tell that he saw with his own eyes when a flood killed a large number of people in the lake area, leaving him a horrible memory. His warning reminds us of a fact. The Xiong'an New District is located in Bayangdian, and it is a depression. The lake area is only 5 or 6 meters above sea level. The Xiong'an New District is 7 to 19 meters above sea level. To the west lies a mountain, which is 1,000 meters above sea level. If the Xiong'an New District encounters heavy rainstorms similar to those in Zhengzhou, all waters in the surrounding area would rush to Xiong'an, and it is unlikely for the waters to drain away quickly. Nevertheless, this time, it rained around the Xiong'an New District even more heavily than in Zhengzhou, but the district was not doomed. The local authority claimed that the rain and flooding we encountered this time was the largest in the history of the past 60 years, while the Xiong'an New District is safe and sound. In fact, it was exactly for the safety of the Xiong'an New District that Zhuozhou was flooded. The Xiong'an New District is Xi Jinping's political project, and thus other places must be sacrificed to it. It is scaring to think that, in the future, it may become a new normal for Zhuozhou to be hit and submerged by floods. Perhaps another Bayangdian Lake will have to be created beside Zhuozhou. These days, the disaster in Zhuozhou has caused great public concern. The various reports on the disaster in Zhuozhou have even attracted extensive attention from the international community. In spite of that, there are still victims who have not been rescued, although 5 or 6 days have passed. Meanwhile, it is unthinkable that the CPC and government leaders in Zhuozhou, who control the resources, have been missing for days. The local people have sent out a search notice, looking for them, asking them to show up and preside over the fight against the flood. Certainly the first one who should show up is Xi Jinping. In the past, at various disasters outside the capital city of Beijing, Xi Jinping has never showed up at the scene in the first time. This time, when Beijing had the biggest flood in the history of 100 years, Xi Jinping still didn't show up. And when Zhuozhou, only 70 kilometers away from Beijing, had an even more serious flood and had lasted for a week, Xi Jinping still didn't show up. What is most hateful is that, as long as Xi Jinping did not go to the scene of the disaster, the Prime Minister, the governor of the province and the mayor could not go either. They are missing altogether. This seems to have become a pattern of behavior for the CPC and government officials. If Xi Jinping does not go to the scene of the disaster, no one dares to go. Obviously, they know that Xi Jinping is the only one who can enjoy the limelight. As a rule, on August the 1st, Xi Jinping gave the so-called important instructions on flood control and disaster relief work. He asked that all local governments should make every effort to rescue the affected people, to cure the injured and appease the families of the victims, to minimize casualties, to ensure the safety of the people's lives and property, and the stability of society. In fact, the only thing Xi Jinping cares about is the stability of the political situation. As for how many people die, he does not care at all. If he really wanted to minimize casualties, he should have made early planning and moved people to safe places before the floods arrived. Everyone knows that in giving such instructions, Xi Jinping is merely putting on a show. Local officials are even less likely to take it seriously. Eventually, a natural disaster was turned into a man-made calamity. The key reason was that officials at all levels did not care about the people's lives. They only cared about how Xi Jinping feels, and they absolutely do not want to take the risk of offending Xi Jinping for the sake of the people. As a matter of fact, in the more than 10 years he has been in power, Xi Jinping has never been at the scene of a disaster in the first time. For this reason, countless people have cursed Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is undoubtedly doing this because he is an arrogant and heartless man. He has always looked down on the world with contempt, as if all the people in the world are his servants. Xi Jinping does not care whether the people live or die, let alone what the people think of him. However, more to the point, Xi Jinping is also doing this out of his fear of the people. Having monopolized all powers of China, Xi Jinping is extremely nervous, extremely worried, and extremely calculating. Everywhere he goes, exceptionally strict security measures are adopted. He is often surrounded by a cohort of safeguards. The people along his inspection route are strictly controlled for fear of any unforeseen incidents. In a flooded area, obviously, it is impossible to take such strict security measures. Not only the time is limited, but also it is difficult to deploy heavy police force in the flooded area. Much less is it possible to control the disaster victims. Xi Jinping considers his personal safety and power more important than anything else. He will never risk going to a disaster site in order to win popularity among the people. As conquerors and descendants of conquerors, they only believe in violence and can only rely on violence. They will never feel safe. Under Xi Jinping's brutal rule, the people fear Xi Jinping. Vice versa, Xi Jinping is also very afraid of the people. What is particularly hateful is that, regardless of the disaster, the official media blatantly reported that Kai Chi, the dean of the central office of the CPC, was in Beidaihe visiting the representatives of the experts who were on vacation there. As a rule, the dean of the central office will be wherever Xi Jinping goes. When Kai Chi showed up in Beidaihe, it means that Xi Jinping has already arrived in Beidaihe. Xi Jinping is indifferent to the people's suffering at all. Now that it was summer, he would take a vacation in the scenic resort of Beidaihe. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, every time Xi Jinping goes out of Beijing, he would visit scenic spots. This time, the main purpose of his tour to Beidaihe is undoubtedly to enjoy the beautiful scenery and pleasant climate. As for the so-called Beidaihe Conference, it is no longer significant. After all, Xi Jinping is already in a position of absolute power and can make all kinds of decisions as he pleases, while everyone else has to be submissive. Under such circumstances, there would be few retired bigwigs who still want to spend summer in Beidaihe. Over the years, reservoirs in many places do not let out water in times of drought. But in times of heavy rains, they may suddenly release water for fear of dam collapse. Every time, this results in serious losses of lives and property. No matter how much the public voices criticize it and how much hatred it stirs up, the situation has remained unchanged. It seems that the CPC will never learn a lesson. However, if it is thus concluded that the CPC has never learned any lesson from any event, or even that they are incapable of correcting errors, then it is obviously a lack of comprehensive understanding and knowledge of the CPC. As a matter of fact, regarding how to maintain their regime, and how to suppress and prevent people's resistance, the CPC will always learn lessons and sum up experience in a very timely manner. And they will not only pay attention to lessons learned at home, but also to lessons learned abroad. And they always promptly formulate procedures and establish systems. In response to various natural disasters, they have secretly made improvement in some special ways. While every time disasters invariably bring great suffering to the people, the CPC's means of controlling the public voice, blocking information, and covering up the truth are constantly being upgraded. For the CPC, no matter how many people die or suffer, As long as the outside world does not know about it, it means that nothing has happened. Although they are not able to prevent disasters from harming the people, they are able to prevent the people from making revolts. This is an important reason why Xi Jinping can disregard the life and death of the people. It is conceivable that there will be another Xiong'an after this Xiong'an, and there will be another Zhuozhu after this Zhuozhu. When will the suffering of the Chinese people come to an end?